what's up, noobs? Today we're gonna go over the top 5. Wait, I meant to say, hey, what's up, YouTube, not noobs. But today we're gonna go over the top 5 builds in Archnemesis League. I do feel like at this point, we do have a pretty good understanding of what will be the best builds in Archnemesis League. I don't really think that these numbers will change that much, and that's partly because there's not really that many more people playing the game at this point in time. And we're going to make a video later on about these player numbers and what probably happened. But off the top of my head, probably it starts with an L and an E. And let me know down in the comments down below what you think those reasons actually are. But regardless, these are the top builds of Archnemesis League. And we're going to go over them and see what actually caused them to rise to the top. So first up, we have a tie for 5th place, actually. So what are so interesting about these builds, and why did I include them as even though they were tied, is mainly because they're kind of like newcomers, and they're definitely builds that drastically benefited from the new uniques, and we'll see why in a little bit. So in Scourge League, you can see Spark doesn't really have any play rate, 1%. Righteous Fire kind of got a little bit popular, but it was still languishing around at like 3%. So something fundamentally changed, and this is because Righteous Fire actually benefited a lot from the new uniques, with 88% of the people using Legacy of Fury, actually 95% if you include only Inquisitors, and 63% Melting of the Flesh, and 60% Ashes of the Star, right? So this is a build that's using 3 of the new uniques. Now, Aegis Aurora is pretty good in general, pretty much because it gives a lot of max res, and it also gives you 5% right there to run a Purity of Ice, and then with Melting of Flesh and then taking Nodes on the tree, you're able to get to 90% res really easily. So you can see here, you get 3% here, and then I think you get 4% from your Purity of Ice, and then some Aura effect, and then another 5% on Aegis Aurora. And the build is super tanky. A lot of people like playing this. You can see it's an insane maximum hit taken and effective HP pool. Also has a huge energy shield regen and life regen at the same time. So people love playing Righteous Fire, and it's just a build that's kind of stood the test of time. So with these new uniques, it kind of got a lot more people interested. And next up, we have the Spark build, and this is mainly on the Aura Stacker, which is a Champion or Ascendant. You can see here, this is the breakdown: 28% Ascendant, 22% Champion, 17% Inquisitor. Now, the nice part about this build is this build has also benefited greatly from all of the new uniques. You have Melting of the Flesh. In the same vein of thought, people are using pretty much 1 purity, so they don't need to run 3 purities, and this does save a lot of aura effectiveness. Reservation efficiency, that helps out a lot to try to fit in all the auras. And people are also using Ashes of the Star as the new amulet. It gives you 20% reservation efficiency if you do decide to go low life. It also works as life reservation efficiency, which is absolutely huge. And then for like Aura Stackers on Spark, you can get a lot of alternate qualities. Like Spark, you can get additional Pierce, additional projectiles, or additional projectile speed. And it also helps out a little bit on all of the alternate quality auras. And Aura Stacker was already kind of seeing a little bit more play last league towards the end. And I think these new uniques made it a lot more popular. And definitely another huge thing are all of the implicits on the chest. Like, let's go check out Aura Stacker real fast. If you take a look at the Aura Stacker on Ascendant, especially on like some life-based variants, you'll see that a lot of people use these Grasping Males. And being able to get this like maximum cold res, maximum fire res, or whatever you want to do, it makes it a lot easier to get to 90% res, and enables us to use the 2 Nebuluses, right? So overall, very cool that they added 2 new builds to the game pretty much in terms of meta builds. So next up, we have Cyclone, and this is always a build that's always towards the top, and mainly it's carried by Cast on Crit. But there's also a tiny portion of people who love playing this weird Cyclone build. Like, they love Cyclone Shockwave or something like that. I don't know if there's a YouTube video regarding the build. But basically, there's a bunch of Slayers who played this, which I'm assuming is for the extra AoE. And then you have a bunch of occultists playing the replica Alberon's Warpath. So pretty much a strength stacking variant of Cyclone Shockwave. And I guess it benefits from the extra AoE from like the occultist nodes, right? So super good. But the main reason why Cyclone is always at the top year after year, it always wins all the awards for the most popular build in the game. If you want to look at it in Scourge League, what's the #1 build? It's always Cyclone. And I do think maybe towards the end of the league, Cyclone might take back his throne, right? It's slowly creeping up there. It's kind of like something inevitable, right? People love cock. Like that's just the main thing in life. People love cock, and that will always be something that will exist forever. And 31% Forbidden Right, right? This is probably the biggest change compared to last league. From last league, we see last league in Scourge League, Forbidden Right was kind of popular, but it wasn't as popular yet. You can see 24% Ice Spear and then 10% Forbidden Right. I think a lot of the spell nerfs, or I don't really know what exactly changed, but maybe just some better guides on Forbidden Right, people realizing how tanky Forbidden Right actually is. And the build also benefits a lot from Aegis Aurora and Melting of the Flesh again. So probably just a combination of those factors push Forbidden Right to the top. So now for cast on crit builds, you mainly have Forbidden Right at 31%, 20% at Ice Spear, and then 10% for Ice Nova. I am currently playing a cast on crit Ice Nova build, and it is extremely, extremely strong with enough gear levels. But this is also another thing, and I do think that a lot of the meta has shifted towards using grasping males, and it's definitely a huge factor because of the Eldritch Implicits that you can craft on now. So next up, we have the most boring build in the game, a build I don't really care much for, so I'm not going to really go over this that much, but it is the one and only minion lovers, right? So there's always minion lovers in the world. It's a kind of a common theme in almost every RPG game, right? There's always going to be people who don't like facing the action straight on and rely on minions to kill everything for them, right? So in Scourge League, we can see that minions kind of fell out of place. Like it was very popular at the start of the league, and then it gradually fell off over time. So minions was like 5%. It wasn't that popular, right? But so Archnemesis League, I think is more the fact that a lot of these top skills were nerfed, like Toxic Raid and stuff, so that more people looked for different starters, and Summon Skeletons ended up being at the top, right? So at the start of Archnemesis League, if we look at it on day one, I think Minions and Explosive Arrow range supreme, so they're at 8%. So Minions have been pretty consistent the whole league, right? But basically, this build benefits a lot from Ashes of the Star. I'm assuming there's some alternate quality for the Summon Skeletons or some other stuff like that. Uses Fleshcrafter, Ruby's Concoction, and Alberon's Warpath. And this the interesting thing I noted was that it has extremely low usage rate of Watcher's Eye, which I kind of find it kind of crazy because don't minion people use auras, and Watcher's Eyes are pretty much a mandatory thing in every single build. Not really sure what they're actually running, but maybe they don't run many auras, right? So don't really know what's going on with that. So if you know down below, let me know down below what is actually going on, why no minion build uses that many Watcher Size. But next up, we have Lightning Strike. And in the end, next up, we have Lightning Strike. Lightning Strike was going to be the number one build, but some unfortunate things happened. Mainly, people fell in love with the way of the bow. I mean, the bow is the bow, right? And melee is melee. Lightning Strike gets stuck on pebbles. So, yeah, 56% Raider, 31% Berserker. Mainly, I tried my hardest to make Berserker more popular, but you know what happens? There's just some people who make a really popular video. And yeah, the video is really high quality, and that's what happens, right? And this is also another thing that happens if you look at videos and don't follow like a new updated video. You can see here, there's no recommended of Crystallized Omniscience, but I don't think many people knew how powerful Crystallized Omniscience was going to be or how popular the item was going to be, right? It's actually kind of funny, kind of crazy that 23% of people don't use Crystallized Omniscience. So let's go see who does not use Crystallized Omniscience, right? And what do you know? All the Raiders don't use Crystallized Omniscience, but the smart Berserkers mostly all do. Not really sure if that's a video thing or if that's just like, it's just crazy not to use Crystallized Omniscience, because if you're not using Crystallized Omniscience, what are you even using, right? So let's go take a look at some of these people. The only other amulet that people can use is Mariline's Fallacy, and that's probably Orhinacore's Sight. But I'm not really sure why the Raiders are using Crystallized Omniscience. The Berserkers who don't use it are probably doing some shenanigans, right? Or they're also accuracy stacking Berserker, right? So that's definitely a precaution about some videos. Like Crystallized Omniscience should be at 100% nearly, and you should not be a Raider and not using Crystallized Omniscience. And that's just like a cardinal sin in my opinion. But another thing to note is that 33% the interrogation and 93% of berserkers use the interrogation. Now the reason behind that is berserkers actually have something called like bliss charges, and not a lot of people know. So like you don't really need to use interrogation on Raider, but bliss charges reduce your crit by 160%. So that's why interrogation is pretty important to cap out your crit. And another thing to note is that Forbidden Flame and Flesh Jewels are kind of like pretty expensive in general for most people to use, and 44% use it, right? So if we look at the other previous builds, you don't even really see that many usage rate of Forbidden Flame and Flesh because the jewel is actually kind of rare and not as common as like Crystallized Omniscience. Now, Lightning Strike started the league pretty popular, and it's probably gonna end up the league at around the same place. I don't really see any changes in this order of rankings of the top skills. And lastly, you can dread it, you can fear it, you can run for it, but Tornado Shot or Bow Bills will one day find its time in the sun, and today it's here, right? 82% Deadeye and 13% Gladiator. The 13% on Gladiator are actually playing Corrupting Fever. And this is a build with 76% Crystallized Omniscience and 54% Forbidden Flame and Flesh, right? So every single build you can see is using some new items and new uniques, and that's very good on GGG's part because these new items, new uniques are definitely making the build viable, right? And yeah, so almost everyone who's not using Crystallized Omniscience, as I can see on PoE Ninja, are using Corrupting Fever pretty much, or they're playing Cast on Crit Ice Spear with Tornado Shot. Now, the nice part about this stuff is Crystallized Omniscience is so popular, right? It seems like every single person is using it. 42% of people are using Interrogation, which is kind of a new thing. A lot of people are playing Ellie Bow of Thicket, so they don't really have that much crit chance, so they're using the Interrogation to get 100% crit. So these two builds, Tornado Shot and Lightning Strike, are pretty much identical in terms of what they actually are. Besides, one is in bow form and another one is in claw form, right? So you have Nightblade versus like the ranged aspect of bows, right? So it just really depends on your playstyle. Now, the reason why this build got so popular is because there were actually a lot of Raider Lightning Strike players that midway through thought, I wanted a nice little change of pace. They wanted to try something different. And a lot of people respect their Raider over the Deadeye Tornado Shot just to jump on the hype train. But basically, this build defined the league. I do think that this is the most meta-defining build of Archnemesis League. And it's kind of nice to see that the bow build actually became the #1 skill in the supposed bow league buff. So what can we actually conclude after seeing all this stuff is that the new uniques were actually a slam dunk with most meta builds utilizing them. I think if you went down the list of all the top meta builds, every single one of them used the new uniques. And that's a pretty nice thing to see, right? Tornado Shot, you can see Crystallized Omniscience. Next up, we have Lightning Strike, Crystallized Omniscience. And then you have Summon Skeletons, Ashes of the Star. And then you have Cyclone. Doesn't really use one. Forbidden Flame and Flash. I guess Cyclone or Cast on Crits kind of ones that don't really use it as much. And then Righteous Fire and Spark both use Ashes of the Star, right? So the main thing to know is that Crystallized Omniscience is probably a little bit overpowered. It's pretty much a mandatory item for every single build that relies on elemental penetration and doesn't need any aura reservation. And it was actually a bow league, right? Everyone thought that it was not going to be a bow league at the start, but with enough buffs, and I do think mainly Crystallized Omniscience, it did end up being a bow league because it finally allowed you to get enough resist and it allowed you to get enough damage at the same time. And Righteous Fire and Spark definitely, I don't think most people would have thought that Righteous Fire and Spark would actually be part of the top 5 skills, but both are very, very strong, tanky, good overall builds. And I do think the whole meta was pretty good, right? There's a lot of different variety of skills. And this is kind of like a nice anecdote about why really good items or really good crafted items allows more builds to be popular, right? Because of how strong Crystallized Omniscience is, it really allows most builds that do elemental damage and relies on elemental penetration for damage to be a lot stronger, right? And this opens up so many different skills that you wouldn't really think would be possible before. And that's why like being able to craft better gear, like in Ritual with like pre-nerf harvest, allows you to try out so many different builds, so many different skills, and it allows for a much more diverse meta, right? So that's why being able to craft our gear and have it be perfect is a huge portion of why the meta is the way it is, right? Then the main thing I want to gloat about is no more explosive arrow and spectral helix. Those things are hot garbage and deserves to be in a trash can. Only time you should be playing those skills is at league start, and it's nice to see that people found out whether because of how bad the skills performed late game or how bad it felt, and they phased them out. So let's look at day one, right? Poisonous concoction, explosive arrow, spectral helix, exsanguinate, all gone. And that's how league start skills should be like, right? A skill that's played at the start and at the end is a pretty rare thing because most skills that are super strong at the start do not have the end game scaling, right? So it was nice to see Lightning Strike crept up there, and Summon Skeletons pretty much was as popular as ever, and Explosive Arrow pretty much disappeared. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you find more Meters, Exalts, and Mage Plus than me. Let me know down below what was your favorite skill of the league, and what do you think they should be nerf with any of the new uniques. But thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.